debates to draw the diagram. But we talked about a city being a place where a group of people live together and cooperate with one another in order to live their lives, right? We drew, what do we put at the center of the city, and how do we represent it? Grant?
The church.
We put God at the center, and we represented by the church, and we were circled. Right? We used the image of the Renaissance garden that Mr. Pagnozzi told us about, right? Okay. Then there's a square around that circle, and what's inside that square? Stephen?
Man.
Men and the activities of men, right? Man and his activities. And what was around the outside of this square? Again, this was the model of the Renaissance garden. Sam?
Nature.
Nature, the rest of nature, the rest of creation. Right? So man was the intermediary between God and the rest of creation. And God put man in charge of the rest of creation, right? What were some of the activities inside that square? All right, just one. Just pick one. Debates, okay. The interchange between men when they disagreed on things, from that arose debates. Civil debate in order to resolve issues. That's what today is. James? Business, the exchange of goods and services between men in order to create a world where men can live and they have everything that they need to live. All right?
Sports.
Sports.
Athletics.
Athletics, recreation in the city, right? And last week we did Olympiad, right? Some of you were here for that. Okay, what was something else? Marco. Law enforcement. Because man is fallen, we need we need laws, right? Going all the way back to the Old Testament rules and laws, 10 Commandments, the book of Leviticus, right? And then modern laws, leading all the way up through the Golden Rule as a law, right? Also, let's say Magna Carta from English common law tradition, Declaration of Independence, right? And the Constitution as a set of laws that we live by in terms of our government. But if you're going to have laws, then you also need law enforcement, right? Because we're fallen. Okay, what else? I think there's only a couple of missing.
Military.
The military. What kind of great one that was? That's one we had. The military. Right. Unfortunately, when a group of people live together in a city, this isn't the unfortunate part, there's going to be other cities, groups of people living together, and sometimes their interests come into conflict, and when their interests come into conflict, sometimes they try to resolve those interests by attacking one another, and so you need a military to defend the city. And one more. I think one more. Somebody else. Buildings. Think buildings, Jack. Going to be next week, in fact. Jackson Brown.
Architecture.
Architecture. Every one of these buildings needs, every one of these excuse me, with God at the center, you need a church, right? With government, you need government buildings. With law, you need courthouses, right? With sports, you need stadiums and arenas, like the most beautiful stadium in the whole world, which is Yankee Stadium. Okay. I know. So we need to think about the architecture. You know how I always say, you know, when you go to a city, the first thing that impresses you about the city is the architecture, right? And we identify certain very famous pieces of architecture with certain cities, right? We've talked about that. So next week, guys, we're going to have two architects in here, and they're going to have you building parts of a city using styrofoam board and stuff. These two guys have done this before, and it was terrific. Was anybody here the first time, Austin?
No, I missed that one.
Gary, I bet you was here. Remember that?
Yeah, he was.
Gary was here? Okay, and was Peter maybe? Peter was here? Okay. So that's what this has been all about, the arts of the city, the arts of the polis. Today is debate, all right? Now I'm going to stop talking, much to everybody's relief, and I'm going to turn it over to the assistant headmaster of the Montfort Academy, the person who wrote that brochure, that beautiful brochure that you've all read about this arts of the polis. Mr. Thaddeus Kaczynski, he's going to explain the entire debate to you and be your moderator for the rest of the afternoon. All right, guys, so without any further ado, Mr. K.
So what we'll do is we will go over the logistics of the debate, the parts of it, and all the different parts everyone plays in this, the structure of it. Then we'll take our little debate oath, which is very important to do, and then we'll begin. But first, I just wanted to say one thing about debate in the polis. I happen to think that debate as an activity that happens in the polis, in addition to all these other things we mentioned, protecting the polis and military, and building the polis and architecture, and ordering it in terms of just external actions and law. To me, debate is really the central activity of the city. In fact, you can't have debate unless you have a city. All right, what do you have when you don't have a city? You have sort of tribes, and what happens? What have we seen in the past with tribes trying to debate? It doesn't really work, does it? You usually get something called tribal warfare. Now, there's a reason for that. Because in order to have debate, civilized debate, you need all the structures that we mentioned. And to me, all those structures are ordered towards the attainment of truth. Right? And the attainment of truth is what then orders all those institutions, too. To know how to build and what to build and why they're building. Debate is the center of that. Now, just one distinction I want to make that's important. You see these topics today that we're debating. They're eminently debatable topics. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that it's not clear exactly what the right answer is. And nobody can impose that on us. There isn't some kind of debate wizard who knows these answers and who's going to sort of, okay, you got it right. No, you got it wrong. In fact, none of us knows what the true answer is. Well, you may think you do. But in reality, none of us actually knows with infallible knowledge what the answers to these are. And that's why we need debate. And hopefully, in debate, we will come to a closer understanding of the truth of these kind of things. But don't mistake that for other kinds of questions that we do have knowledge of, because the culture we live in would like to confuse you on this. They would like to say, let's debate whether or not man and women should be married. Should it be a man and a woman? Or some other kind of grouping? Or let's debate whether or not, we should allow abortion, right? Well, that's debatable, isn't it? I mean, people disagree, don't they? No. They do disagree, but it's not debatable. And who gives us the infallible knowledge of these moral questions?
God.
Yeah. God does through His holy church. You know what? Even if God never revealed these answers to us, we'd still know it. Something called the natural law. I'm sure in the law Renaissance man, Mr. Cal, talked to you about the natural law. Okay? You can even know these questions by reason, like 2 + 2 = 4, abortion is wrong. Same thing. So I want you guys to understand that there's a distinction between what we're debating and the things that aren't debatable, like those absolute moral questions and theological questions. Christ is God or He is not. Let's debate it. No. We know He is, right? So it's just a very important distinction to keep in mind. But having said that, all these topics, even though they seem to be kind of very not as absolute as abortion or marriage or things like that, or theology, they have principles underneath them that are very important to think about. And so keep those in mind during the debate. I'll comment after we debate on these. But principles such as, how should we take care of our dependent, weak, older people who have a hard time taking care of themselves? What responsibilities do we have towards the weaker among us? Does the stronger have a responsibility to protect the weak or to exploit the weak? That question is really at the heart of the Social Security debate. How best do we order that kind of protection? See, so these principles get in there. Keep those in mind. All right. So having said that, let's just look at the debate format quickly. You've studied this already, but just to go over it for those who have not debated yet, how many are they who have not done this before? Good. I'm sure you'll do fine. And this is mostly for you, so you just confirms what you already know about the structure of the debate. Okay. Well, basically what happens is you have the affirmative side goes first and speaks for about 3 minutes. He lays out the argument. He basically presents it's like the opening statement in a court case, right? You're going to lay out your argument, outline form, and make an impression on your audience. Now, of course, right after that's done, you're going to get challenged on it. And that's when the negative side comes in and asks you a question that's meant to trip you up, that's meant to contradict something you've said. And that's usually 2 minutes or so. And at that point, I will allow you guys to go back and forth. That's the fun part. Okay? Negative asks a question, affirmative side responds, that leads to another question, and then you go for about 2 minutes. Now, at that point, anybody on either side can chime in at that point. It's sort of like free-for-all. Okay? Then we have the negative side gives their presentation for about 3 minutes. And remember, the negative side, when you give your presentation, can include some of the material that the affirmative side said. You could actually refute some of it. So what do you want to be doing during the debate? Taking notes, right? On the other side position. Take notes. Remember to do that. Because then you could respond to that. That's very effective. So you could respond to someone's position, like spontaneously. Okay, it's effective. And then, of course, the affirmative side will ask a challenging question, back and forth, 2 minutes. Then you have the conclusion. The negative side will give its rebuttal. Now that should include a lot of what happened in the debate, such as the affirmative side lost the debate for this reason. They said this, and I said this, and they weren't able to respond. And then they said this to me, and I responded and refuted it, and they couldn't answer me back. You see why I won? Something like that, okay? You want your conclusion to really sum up the debate. Like, did you guys just see that debate? And you realize I won, don't you? And here's why. Okay, that's how it goes. And then the affirmative side begins the debate and finishes the debate. And concludes with their interpretation of the debate. And then when the two sides are done interpreting the debate, we vote. And in fact, all of us vote. Actually, we voted before. I forgot to mention that. Before the debate starts, we all vote. Do we agree with the resolution right now without having heard anything? Or do we disagree with it? Or do we don't know? And we vote. Then the debate happens. And after the debate, we vote again. And if we've changed, it means the debate was effective. If we change to the affirmative side was more effective than the negative. If we change from negative to affirmative to negative, the negative side was better. If we didn't know in the beginning and we went to one of the sides, that also shows that that was more effective. Now, just because we were convinced by a debate side doesn't mean necessarily that that was the better debate of the two. Remember that. It's sort of like, who can persuade you the best is not necessarily indicative of the excellence of your debate. But sometimes it is. So if you lose, don't be too discouraged. It may be that the topic you're arguing for is really hard to get people to think about, to agree with, right? If you're arguing for a topic and the people who come in here are already convinced of it, that's really difficult. And chances are you might lose that one. But don't worry about that.
Or if everybody agrees with you, you're arguing the side that everybody agrees with, and the other guy only has to get one person to move to
His position. Or
either his position or undecided,
right.
and they win.
Yeah.
So it could very well be that the odds are against you winning just because of the nature of the audience and the nature of the question that's being asked. So don't feel too badly if you come up losing the debate.
All right, any questions at all? I think it's pretty clear. We may have a surprise debate with a surprise debater later on if we have time. So hopefully we'll have that. I'll just leave you in suspense about that, okay? All right, what I've got here to pass out quickly is the honor code of the debater. And we will now say this, and then we'll begin. Just pass these down. Remain seated. Okay. Just say it with me. I am a debater. I attempt to be worthy of this title by striving to observe the code of the debater. For myself, I will research my topic and know what I'm talking about. I will respect the subject matter of my debates. I will choose persuasion over coercion and violence. I will learn from victory and especially from defeat. I will be a generous winner and a gracious loser. I will remember and respect where I came, even though I am now a citizen of the world. I will apply my criticism of others to myself. I will strive to see myself in others. I will, in a debate, use the best arguments I can to support the side I am on. I will, in life, use the best arguments I can to determine which side I am on for others. I will respect their rights of freedom of speech and expression, even though we may disagree. I will respect my partners, opponents, judges, coaches, and tournament officials. I will be honest about my arguments and evidence and those of others. I will help those with less experience because I am both student and teacher. I will be an advocate in life, siding with those in need, and willing to speak truth to power. Okay, keep those. All right, so now, if we could have our first debaters take the stand. The affirmative side will be over here, and the negative side will be over here. Sam Kaplan and Grant Goss on the affirmative side, Alex DeGrasse, Eddie Mike on the negative side. And this debate is the following resolution. The West Side Stadium, the New York Jets Stadium, should be built in Manhattan. It should be built in Manhattan. Is what the affirmative side will be arguing. The negative side will be arguing against that position. One quick note about these resolutions. If you're clever, you will realize that the debate topic is very specific. And you may not be aware of this when you're debating. For instance, the West Side Stadium should be built in Manhattan. Now somebody might argue on the negative side, I don't think we should build the West Side Stadium. But that's not what's argued, right? What's argued is it shouldn't be built in Manhattan. So it's behooves you guys to look at that carefully and remember to debate exactly what it says. Okay, we had a few times when we had debates over the years where someone won because they were able to really specifically fine-tune the debate topic and the other side wasn't ready for it and they had nothing to say. It was very clever. So just one thing to remember there. All right, everyone except for the debaters can vote on this. How many of you right now, if you asked yourself what you thought, would say that you agree that the West Side Stadium not should be built or not, but should be built in Manhattan? That's it. That's the question. Should the West Side Stadium be built in Manhattan? If you say yes to that, raise your hand. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we only have 5. Now remember, there's 3 positions. You may not know the answer. If you really don't have one way or the other in your mind, then be honest about that, and you're allowed to say, I don't know. Okay? How many of you disagree and think that the West Side Stadium should be not built in Manhattan? Which could also include not be built at all. It could, right? That's underneath not be built in Manhattan. Because if it's not built at all, it's not built in Manhattan. So it's either way, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And how many of us at this point, I'm not going to vote in these, are undecided about the question? And you can't vote twice. That wouldn't make any sense. That would be your schizophrenic. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. All right, now I hope we have 19 people in here, because sometimes all of a sudden we have 20 votes after the debate. So if you didn't vote this time, another reason, don't vote after the debate. So we keep out problems, okay? All right, we will begin with Mr., I believe, Gass doing the affirmative resolution.
Good morning. Good morning, parents, teachers, students of the Renaissance Man Invitation. My colleague, Mr. Kaplan, and I, Mr. Goss, will be arguing that resolve. The West Side Stadium should be built in Manhattan. We of the affirmative will be arguing that it should. My colleague will now tell the reason why.
First, West Side could have awesome results, including a center of culture and entertainment. There could be cafes, restaurants, shops, a 1,500-room hotel, office and residential space, plus a chain of parks along the riverfront. West Side will also not take away any homing space because it will be built entirely on the platform. It will also be able to hold other sporting events like the college basketballs, Final Fours, and the Winter X Games. If the stadium is built, the Jets will also offer $800 million of private investment to New York to build a revenue which will generate $72 million in new annual revenue. There's more. Sorry. Also, it jumpstarts New York City's chances of being in the Olympics. It will bring tourism, plus it will build the mass transit under the stadium to prevent traffic.
Okay, we'll have our negative rebuttal.
Oh, okay. Would it not be more cost effective to build the stadium in an outer borough?
Well, West Side Stadium is the only location in close proximity to the 911.
Can you please repeat the question?
Okay. Would it not be more cost effective to build the stadium in an outer borough?
Well, the west side of Manhattan is the only location adjacent to the Javits Center, allowing it to serve a true multi-use facility instead of a standalone stadium.
Okay, then is $600 million better spent on schools, offices, and hospitals?
Well, like I said, right, if the stadium is built, the Jets will offer $800 million to be spent for private investment in New York for schools and things like that, like cleaning the streets and everything.
Are you aware that the Yankees tried to build a West Side Stadium and failed? Doesn't this demonstrate resistance by Manhattan residents?
Can you repeat the question?
Are you aware that the Yankees tried to build a West Side Stadium and failed? Doesn't this demonstrate resistance by Manhattan residents?
No.
Okay. We'll now have the negative construction.
Okay. We feel that it would be more cost effective to build the stadium in an outer borough such as Queens. This is because $600 million is better spent on schools, offices, and hospitals. The Big Apple, if it does need the 2012 Olympics, can build the stadium in Queens because that's where they're planning the Olympic complex. And I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but Moscow, which has a really long shot of getting the 2012 Olympics, surpassed New York in government and public support. I remember reading that some time ago. And also, like I said, Mayor Giuliani tried to get the Yankees to build the West Side Stadium. He failed. This could be a possible terrorist target. And also, it's going to cause traffic congestion, which Manhattan is already a borough congested by traffic. And the labor unions think it will create jobs, but jobs would really be more easy to find in an office complex.
And the $600 million taxpayer dollars are being used to $375,000 is being used to platform over the railroad tracks, and $225 is being used to build the tractable roof over the stadium, which you don't really need. So they're not really getting an easy ride.
Also, many Manhattan residents are opposed to this stadium. Actually, they've taken polls to prove that. I forget what the actual results are, but I know that they didn't allow the West Side Stadium to be.
And the stadium, total cost of the stadium is $1.4 billion, and $800 million is being used from private investments. And even if they build the West Side Stadium, New York shouldn't give the $600 million to private investments, because the person that's doing the private investments is one of the richest men in the world, so he doesn't really need $600 million taxpayer dollars.
Okay, very good. Let's have a question or two from the affirmative side.
Okay, well, you said that,
You said that this would probably be a big place for terrorism, right?
What?
You said that this could be a big place for terrorists, that they would probably want to bomb it, West Side Stadium.
Yes, I did, because that's always a risk, and no one here wants to live through a second terrorist attack on New York City, I take it.
What about the stadium in Washington, D.C.?
there are many other stadiums all over the country, and they have never been bombed, so why would it cause more risk if we just had another?
Okay, because this is actually a stadium, this would actually be a quite large stadium, one that could host both the Super Bowl and the Olympics, so it's going to be quite large, and that's why I think of something. Is it turned on? Okay. Yeah, like I said, it is, it's quite large, so so even if there has never been another terrorist attack on a stadium, it would probably be an ideal site for terrorist attacks because it's large.
But the one in Washington, D.C. is also at the Capitol, so they could bomb that. Also, while they're there, they could just bomb the president.
Yeah, well, the stadium in Washington, D.C. will not be a multitask stadium. Stadium in the West Side, if they build it, will be used for the Olympics, Final Four, Super Bowl, Jets. They have Javits Center. There will be more parks and a lot of other places, restaurants, hotels. So.
Okay, and now we have the final concluding remarks. We'll start with the negative side. 1 minute.
This is a stadium that, contrary to popular belief, will not create jobs, except those of aisle vendors, concession owners, ticket people, and the like. Although there are 4 other boroughs, one of which is Queens. This is where the Olympic complex is being planned. The original hometown of the Jets, Gotham's largest borough in terms of land area, which means it should have a lot of undeveloped land. If the Big Apple needs a stadium in the 2012 Olympics, why don't they put it there? This has happened before. Mayor Giuliani tried to get a new stadium for the Yankees in the same area. It failed, and this one should too, since it isn't the best use for $600 million taxpayer dollars. Alternatives include offices, hospitals, and schools. These are all much better than some stadium, especially one that will cost $600 million. Also, it will cost a lot less than Queens, and the saved money can be used to construct offices, hospitals, and schools. And, yeah, so that's what's going to happen. Also, this isn't a stadium supported by the public. The majority of NYC residents don't support this, so, okay, you speak.
Yeah, and the $600 million can also be used to put a computer in every single classroom in New York City, rebuild the school and firehouses, and invest the rest of the money in rundown neighborhoods to repair vacant lots.
Okay, and we will conclude our debate with the affirmative concluding statement.
Well, the chief reasons why we think that West Side Stadium should be built in Manhattan is that West Side Stadium would bring more business to Manhattan and more tourism. It's not true that it would bring hardly any business to just it would bring the West Side Stadium would be able to have cafes, restaurants, hotels. It would be bring lots of business. Plus, it would give New York City a chance to have the Olympics. It would be a great entertainment for everyone around in New York City to go to any different events. And also, our opponent said that there would be traffic, which is not more traffic, which would be not true because there's normally at the Meadowlands, there 95% of the people that go to Meadowlands drive by car. Almost 50% of them have to go through New York City. But because of things like the mass transit, so like there would be only 30% driving by car. We're causing less traffic.
Okay. All right, and there we have the debate, first debate, very good. Just consider in your mind, remember you're not voting for who had the best debate. You're basically voting on your own thoughts and feelings. Whether or not you've moved any direction whatsoever from where you were before the debate. Are you at all inclined to think differently about your position? Are you more inclined to think of the opponent's position or to be undecided? Or if you were undecided, are you a bit more inclined to be decided on one of the two positions? That's what you're considering in your vote, okay? All right, how many of us now, after the debate, think that the West Side Stadium should be built in Manhattan? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have one person switched. Okay? Look, if you convince one person, you've won. Even if you lose the entire debate, if you've done that, you've done a good job. Okay? So remember that. Even if you haven't convinced anybody, it doesn't necessarily have to do with your debate. It might just be they're stubborn. So anyway. Okay, how many of us now disagree and think that the West Side Stadium should not be built? And that would be, you were moved by the negative side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Should have 4 undecided. You bet. We do. Good. Yes, 4. All right.
Mr. Kaczynski, you wrote the disagree. Oh wait, never mind. Sorry.
Okay. So let's take a look at what happened. We have the affirmative side gained 1, the negative side gained 2, and the undecided lost 3 and went to the disagree or agree. So it looks to me as if the negative side won that debate, as they gained 2. Very good. The following resolution. Americans should be able to put some of their Social Security contributions into private accounts. Americans should be able to put some of their Social Security contributions into private accounts. Arguing on the affirmative side, it's James Lanfranchi, Jack, how do you say your last name? Lajeunesse. On the negative side, we are missing one of the debaters. We have Leonard Logsdale, who will have to take this upon himself, although I can help you out if you need it. But if you don't, I'll let you go, okay? I'll let you do your stuff. All right, we'll take a vote. To put some of their earnings, some of their Social Security money into private accounts. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many of us disagree with that statement? Should not be able to do that? 1. And how many of us don't know, really, at this point? Which is the better positioning? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right, we begin with the affirmative resolution introductory statement.
Good morning. With a large amount of baby boomers heading to retirement, many in the poverty or lower middle class levels will turn to Social Security to pay their bills. And with the increase of average lifespan of Americans, the Social Security system will inevitably go bankrupt. Then it will not generate sufficient funds to thousands of retirees relying on the system. To solve this, only one of two courses can be taken. First one, raise taxes to increase funds generated, which will put more pressure on our already fragile economy. 2, cut benefits paid out and allow Americans to put their Social Security funds into private accounts to increase their funds. More than 60% of Americans own stock. The increase in private accounts would mean that the market value will go up. Any investment advisor or economist will tell you that a diversified portfolio of stocks is safe in the long term. Letting Americans put their funds into private accounts will give poor Americans a better chance to retire wealthy. Example, a family earning $30,000 per year could collect $213,743 in their account in a return of 5%. And if they earn 10%, they can receive $1,046,370. In the current system, if you die before collecting your funds, it goes to the government. But with private accounts, you'll be able to leave your funds to your kin, such as leaving for your grandchild's college funds, or to a charity with good cause.
Very good. You have about 30 seconds. Do you want to add anything to that? You don't have to. No? Okay. We have our cross-examination.
If there is private social security accounts, what will happen if someone spends all their money for whatever reason, and then their account, and then there'll be nothing left, and when they get older, where will they be? They won't have anything to take care of them.
Well, many economists and financial advisors have already calculated what the odds of that happening, and it's actually very safe in the long term to have a very diversified portfolio in the stock market.
But still, for a few people who it does happen to, where will they be, on the streets?
That was a question I didn't really hear at that point.
If there is private social security accounts, what will happen if someone spends all their money in their account? Where will they be when they get older?
Well, still that is very unlikely to happen, but also many will have financial advisors to help them in making a portfolio.
Yes. Yes, and I'm sure about this, but I think that you're not allowed to spend the money in a private account.
We have about 30 seconds. You can ask any questions you like or respond to that. Yeah? Okay. All right. Well, we have the negative introductory remarks.
Hello, parents and children. We are all gathered here today to debate on different things. I will argue about the ongoing conflict about Social Security. I think that the government should take care of citizens' Social Security accounts. This is a much safer way for Social Security accounts to maintain the money in them.
Yeah, please.
Help them out a little bit. The government has a responsibility to maintain the health and lives of its citizens. And the government has the obligation to look after the common good of the city, of the polis. And part of the responsibility of the government includes providing some kind of safety net for the most weak and defenseless among us. Not because the government doubts the goodwill of its citizens, but perhaps because the government has the ability and the resources to protect those who perhaps fall through the cracks.
just as the government has the obligation, responsibility, and power to protect our country from attacks, individual citizens do not have that ability. It's simply not in their power to maintain security against foreign enemies. Just so then the government has the same kind of power to be able to apply its rather powerful resources through taxation and through bureaucratic oversight to be able to protect those who, perhaps even with the goodwill of our citizens, aren't able to be protected. And having stated that principle, one of the good means to this end would be not allowing the privatization of Social Security accounts. You wouldn't want the post office to be privatized. You wouldn't want utility companies to be privatized. Because once things are privatized, you always run the risk of having the stronger, the ruthless, the heartless capitalist exploiters using their cunning and energy to exploit the weak. And there's only one way to prevent that from happening is to have publicly funded and organized utilities, as well as safety nets for the elderly.
Yes. Question. Where in public law does it state that the federal government is responsible for providing income to retired persons?
Just because it might not be in there, everything that we do has to be in the Constitution. So if it doesn't say in the Constitution that we can take care of our elderly people, should we just leave them?
Well, another thing about the private accounts is that the elderly people will still be receiving their funds, but they may not receive it at the same amount at a time. They may receive it a bit less, but they will still receive the amount of money that they would usually get.
Citizens, Social Security accounts, professionals if they take care of the money. I think that the government should take care of the Social Security accounts because even if a lot of people will be responsible for money, there will be a few that have no idea what to do with it. They'll spend it right away. And then there won't be any of it when we be a little older. There may be elderly people just living on the streets with nobody to take care of them, because none of them money.
You know, I think I should just come clear about my true position here. And, you know, I mentioned before that I thought the citizens were able to take care of themselves and the dependents, and they had goodwill, but I don't really think that actually. It seems to me that only professionals and experts who are connected to our bureaucracy and government have the goodwill and the ability to provide for the material sustenance of Americans. When Americans are left by themselves, they tend to have an inability to see beyond their own stomachs and their own individual lives. And in order to help our citizens to become moral and responsible, you know, the good government needs to step in and encourage our citizens by basically showing them how it's done. And it has succeeded in the past. Welfare programs in the past have helped those without the ability to compete in a racist society that we live in. And
So I would say that the government is a solution to the problem, as it is to perhaps all of our problems in this society.
Yes. All right. Well, the Social Security system is inevitably bound to go bankrupt. This new system will benefit all Americans. Older retired people will still receive their funds, and younger people will be able to store money and prepare for their retirement. Also, billions of dollars will go to corporate investments, and that will improve our economy.
In the end, this privatizing of Social Security will make up for the benefits cut from the system, and also billions of dollars will be injected into the corporate investment, improving our economy and beneficial to all Americans. And also, it will lower unemployment rates and inflation, and will set a greater standard of living society for Americans.
I'm just going to take a false position here like I just took before, just for the sake of see what you guys can say to this. And what I said before about the government being that solution, it's tongue-in-cheek, okay? You guys know what that means? I wasn't being serious, you know. I was just taking a position, okay?
You know, seems to me that to solve this problem, we have to first understand, you know, what we value in our society. And those of us who really don't produce anything, who have no utility, who aren't productive, you know, are a drain on our resources, and it really infringes upon the freedom of the healthy, you know, to be able to, you know, pursue their own passions and desires and goals. And I think, you know, older people, you know, if they had their choice, they wouldn't really desire to be such a drain on other people. And, you know, Sweden and these other countries are very advanced in this with their laws providing euthanasia. You know, the merciful ending of a useless suffering life. So perhaps maybe after this debate, next debate, we can talk about the goodness of euthanasia in order to solve the problem of our old people. What do you think about that?
Sounds good.
Do you think that sounds good?
Sounds good to debate it, or it sounds good to?
Yeah, to debate it.
But do you think my position makes sense, or am I missing something?
Well, as I said before, the older people will still be receiving their regular funds. They may not be receiving it. If they receive it monthly, they may receive it a bit less than they usually receive it. But overall, they'll still receive the amount of money that they were supposed to get in the long run.
So you think they should receive money to keep living, even if they're not productive?
Yes.
Good. I mean, well, that's wrong. So.
All right, very good. I just wanted to bring that position up because of the Terry Schiavo case that was, you know, around, and you know, there are many people in government in our country who have that view that I just presented, and I think it bears upon the Social Security debate, because if we don't think that the weak and the helpless and the non-productive members of our society are worth anything, and why would we? If we stop believing that every person is made in the image and likeness of God, right? Which doesn't require them to be productive, to be loved, okay? Then this debate takes on a whole different hue, because if we don't value the weak and the helpless as being images of Christ for us to administer to, and to learn from their suffering, then you could probably imagine what might happen. It's already happened in certain countries where older people who are not produced, their families just, you know, abandon them to certain hospitals, and you know they're given injections and killed in certain European countries. It's called euthanasia, right? So it's a rather sobering thought, and hopefully you guys will be able to take this debate when you get older into the public to prevent such a tragedy and such a horror from happening in our country. So just something to think about in this debate. Okay, let's take our vote again. how many of us agree at this point, we're convinced by Len Frankie side there, that there should be privatization of Social Security? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, we have 2. By the way, if you didn't vote last time, 2 of us somehow ducked out of the second vote here. There's 19 the first time and 17. So there should only be 17. Okay, voting. All right, disagree. How many of those think that it should not be privatized, the government should be responsible for Social Security organization? Okay. 1, 2. 1, 2. Raise your hands high, guys, okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay. And how many of us are now undecided on the position? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 19. So I don't know what happened last time. Shoot, what are you gonna do here? So it looks like we have 19 and we have 17. Did anybody not vote last time? Did you vote this time?
No.
You didn't vote either this time, huh? I must have miscounted then. Does anybody remember your votes? Do you remember all your votes? Okay, let's do it again. This happens sometimes. I don't know why, but... All right, just pretend like the debate never happened. Just vote like you did last time. Okay, before the debate, how many of you agreed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That sounds right. Okay. And disagree? You sure?
No, yeah, I was the only
So it was
disagreed.
just you.
Yeah, just one.
So it means that we're supposed to have 8 undecided. Okay, raise your hand.
Saying
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait a minute. Try that again. Okay, maybe we have 20 now, okay? Raise your hand if you're undecided.
Do you know why, Mr. Kaczynski? Because there's only three men at the debate rather than 4.
That's right, so we should have 20.
We should have one
Okay,
more.
that's right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that's right. Well, we only had 17 before, I don't know what happened there. Okay, let's try this again. All right, out of the 20, how many of us, after the debate, agree that it should be privatized? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Disagree. Government. 1, 2, 3. That was the same. And we should have 5 undecided. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. All right, let's see what happened. The positive affirmation side gained 2. The negative side gained 2. Right? So it looks like a tie, doesn't it? We have a tie. Perfect tie there.
Biggest change was in the undecided.
Yeah, the undecided really changed.
Oh, yeah.
What do we do with a tie? I guess we just leave it. It's a tie. Okay, very good. Okay, good. Thanks, guys.
I don't know if we've ever had a tie.
I know, I know. Yeah, we have it.
Yes, we
1, 2, 3. Wait, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? And how many of us are undecided? Should be 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We're missing Father.
Missing, okay, well, he didn't vote yet. So, 1, raise your hands high, undecided. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. All right, so we'll have 18. All right, we'll begin. Affirmative resolution.
Good morning, Renaissance men. Question is, should the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge be open to oil drilling? The answer is yes. America should begin drilling in Anwar. Why? Because America is dependent on getting oil from other countries, and some of those countries are our sworn enemies.
It would be better if America was independent on getting its own oil, because the oil price is lower, and if the price is lower, the American economy will have a steady flow of energy. And if the American economy is strong, we will have a strong force for good.
If we were to start drilling in Anwar, there is not much of a chance of an accident occurring, because over the past 30 years, our technology has improved. And even if there is an accident, which there is a small chance of, We also have the technology of cleaning it up.
And only 9 out of 10 of a percent of ANR will be affected by, which is leaving to be 99% of ANR. It will be unharmed. 16 million barrels of oil will be produced a day. It will also help the people of Alaska. Most of the Alaskans and Americans prefer oil drilling and ANR. 71% of Alaskans prefer drilling, and 58% of Americans prefer drilling. Each barrel would be cheaper than oil from the Persian Gulf and could save us billions of dollars. Each barrel would cost $50.
Okay, cross-examination questions?
A wildlife reserve is a place where wildlife can be protected. Oil drilling would destroy the wildlife. If you destroy the wildlife in the reserve, what's the point of the reserve?
Well, as I said before, only 9/10% of animal will be affected by the oil drilling, leaving 99 and 9/10% for the animals and all the nature.
But even though the oil would affect that, there would be hundreds of miles of roads and pipelines and all sorts of buildings like power plants to make the machinery work for the oil drilling, and hundreds of miles would be affected with roads and built like workers, but there would be hundreds of workers, so they would have to have a lot of living quarters for them all.
The drilling would be on a coastline and it would be in the winter, so basically no animal life would be out during that time. Also the caribou, when there was oil drilling in another bay in Alaska, their numbers have increased as well, so no harm has been done to them. They would do most of the work in the winter and it would not affect any of the animal life.
But the coast.
Walter, do you want to answer the question?
How much oil is imported from the Middle East and what you said are foreign enemies?
About 19 billion barrels a day.
Like what percentage is the U.S.?
Pretty much 25, no, more than 25, like 45%. And this would, no, actually 25%, and the oil that we would be drilling from Alaska would count as 25% as well of the oil being covered on America.
But the reserve is already producing 25%. And we are getting most of our oil from Canada and Mexico already.
Okay, all right, we'll have negative opening remarks.
Oil drilling will interrupt the migrations and breedings of 160 species of birds, scare 3 species of bears into abandoning their cubs, reduce the muskox and caribou birth rate by 25 to 50%, and oil leaks would devastate the seals, fish, and other marine animals. The drilling would require industrial complexes across virtually the entire plain, hundreds of miles of roads and pipelines, many wellheads, airports, helipads, refineries, housing facilities, landfills, reservoirs, docks, and gravel causeways, not to mention production plants, gas processing facilities, seawater treatment, power plants, and gravel mines. How can you possibly say it will not harm the wildlife? The U.S. consumes 25% of the world's oil. By becoming more fuel efficient, the U.S. could eliminate that need to import oil from unstable regions of the world. And in the neighboring Kenai Refuge, there are over 350 oil spills, fire fires and explosions every year. We cannot expect any different from this one. So, and the Native Indians support the drilling because it would create new jobs and they would not be dependent on the caribou. But it would also destroy their heritage and reduce tourism to the NWR, which would make it lose money and be unable to control the pollution generated by the drill.
Okay, cross-examination question?
If you did not drill for oil, what other energy systems would you have to back it up?
Well, we could start using electric cars more electricity, and just other forms of electricity.
And also, we could use the money that would be used for the oil drilling to research into cheaper and better ways of using the power.
Cars that run on electricity is a form of alternative energy, and alternative energy is in development, but it won't be ready nor affordable for several decades. So what energy source do you plan using until the alternatives are ready?
Solar.
What?
Solar power.
What about it?
Could you repeat the question?
Okay. Cars that run on electricity is a kind of a form of alternative energy, and alternative energy is in development, and it won't be ready for several decades. And what do you plan using until the alternatives are ready and affordable?
Solar power and wind power, but also the money that we could use from the oil drilling in place of it, we could research and figure out better ways to use power.
Using the wind energy, that usually kills thousands of migratory birds a year. That would be just as dangerous than for oil drilling, is what you have been saying, and many environmentalists have been saying as well.
We could use water power.
Water power?
All right, we have to have, okay, that's good exchange there. Let's have the negative final concluding remarks.
Overall, drilling for Arctic oil is dangerous. Not only can it harm wildlife, but it would cost extravagant sums of money. This money should be used for research into cheaper energy sources. The Arctic National Wildlife Reserve is home to a diverse array of wildlife. Of the 19 million acres of land in the reserve, the coastal plain is the most vulnerable. It is here that the proposed drilling will take place.
The proceeds from drilling could dramatically lower the price of oil, leading to another economic boom. It would lessen our dependence on foreign oil, especially in the Middle East.
Because of technology today, drilling could be accommodated to the National Wildlife Reserve, so it would not cause any damage or disruption to the ecosystem. It would dramatically help the economy and the people of Alaska.
All right, and that ends our debate. Okay. If you voted last time, vote again. How many of us now agree with the position that drilling should be permitted in the ANWR? Okay. Raise them high. Drilling should be allowed. Oh, wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. How many of us disagree now with that position? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Wait.
Wait. One more. 10. And how many of us disagree? I mean, sorry, I don't know. Just one? Is that right? 17. Yeah. Okay. No, 18. Should have 2. Just one disagreement, one not unknown. Everybody debated. I mean, everybody voted. Well,
I think they disagree here, Mr. Krasinski, maybe.
Yeah, let's do the disagree one more time. It's not gonna matter, I think the difference is pretty high here. Yeah, disagree. Okay, there should not be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There it is. Okay. All right, let's see what happened. We had the agreement side gained 4, the negative side gained 2, and the undecided went 6 away from the undecided. And so we have a gain of 4 in the agreement, so the affirmative side wins the debate. Very good. Starting through 12th grade should be required to pass state-sanctioned tests, basically, minimum skills examinations. Okay? The idea is that we're talking about every school here, homeschoolers, private schools, public schools. Everybody in our country who is educated in school, in K through 12, will have to eventually take some kind of state test to show forth their, just like you need inspection of your car or something, right? You need that, you have to do it. It will be the same with the inspection of your brain, of your mind, by the state. Okay, so how many of us believe that they should be required to pass some kind of minimum skills examination offered by the state? This would be akin to a regents exam, I guess, which are not actually mandatory right now. You don't have to take those. It would be something like that, mandatory regents exam. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. How many believe that students should not be required? See, by the way, you may think it's a nice thing to do if they want to do it, right? It's not that you're against the test, but it's the idea that they're required, they're mandatory. That's the thing we're really debating here, okay? How many of us think that they should not be required to pass these kind of tests? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. And how many are undecided? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. 22. All right. Okay? Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 22. Yep. Okay, affirmative side. We'll begin with the affirmative construction.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are arguing that children K through 12 should take state-sanctioned minimum skills tests because in recent tests of international countries, or international students, the U.S.'s students placed 24th out of 29. And we're the richest country in the world, and I don't think that should be really happening for education. To fix that problem, we could put in standardized tests to figure out what's wrong with our schools and then fix it.
Standardized tests will make schools that aren't as good as others improve their techniques. It will also motivate students to learn instead of just memorizing, because nowadays people just memorize all the stuff instead of actually learning and sticking the knowledge, make the knowledge stick. It also improves the accountability of students in schools.
It improves the accountability because anybody can say that they're teaching their kids math, but maybe not everybody can teach it. So if you gave everybody a standardized test, then you'd find out who was teaching and who wasn't.
Okay. Negative cross-examination.
Mine's kind of a long question. How can a test ensure 100% of the time every student achieve knowledge that will give lasting results while each student's needs, priorities, failing learning environments, and a certain amount of bias, quality, and unfairness in the test itself could affect students and prevent them from moving forward and gaining the knowledge they need to progress in life and move on? If you were to use the analogy of an immigrant coming to America, do you really think that he would be impressed or approve of this part of America's educational system?
I think that he probably would, although it does depend on the immigrant, because if he finds out that his children will definitely get all the things they need. Maybe he won't be living in the best neighborhood or something, and that way they'll make sure that his children are actually learning, not just skimming through school, getting just barely passing grades, and then going into life, maybe just being a McDonald's worker or something.
Most standardized state-sanctioned tests will have a time limit. And when a student is doing one of those tests with a time limit, they would probably be thinking more about how much time he has and not what the question is asking.
Well, they usually provide more than enough time, and most of the teachers, they put them all on the same time. So if that was found to be a problem, they'd change that and maybe put less emphasis on the time. But since they go through so many, the tests go through so many, I guess testings, you could call it, to make sure that they're valid and everything, and the questions are not hampered by the time limits, and all the students are comfortable with it, then they'll actually have students get grades on them.
Think about, well, the Bible says that kindergarten to the 12th grade should take this test. Think about a kid in kindergarten. Do you think he would want to take a standardized test like that? It's pressure on a little kid to, finish a test in a set amount of time. Don't you think that when they're out of 12th grade and they're fully developed, that they should then take the test?
Well, since all your knowledge is cumulative, like in second grade, you'll learn your addition and subtraction, and that will lead to multiplication, which leads to division, which leads to algebra. Then even though second grade might not seem important, as that it actually is important. And also the standardized test for kindergartners will probably just mean like which picture does not belong. A bumblebee, a flower, a beehive, and a car.
Okay, we'll have a negative construction, please.
Good morning, parents, teachers, and fellow students of the Mofford Academy. My colleague Thomas Schuman and I, Austin Wyan, come today to argue against the resolution that kindergarten through 12th grade students should not be required to complete state-sanctioned minimum skills tests. We have many reasons and persuasive arguments to support our side. They are as follows. Each student is different, and everyone has different needs and requirements. So why should students be forced to complete a test designed for everyone, but may not work for one or many persons because he or she is tested in one area or field of study that they are unprepared or not ready for? Why not leave the teaching and testing to the teachers who the students can relate to and feel more comfortable with? Why should students fail to advance and move ahead according to their extent of knowledge because they are confronted with a lifeless, unfair, and biased state-sanctioned test? The government is not the best organization to determine what kind of educational material every student should hold as a priority. There is also pressure for students to achieve high test scores. That pressure on students who may learn in a different way or less quickly than other students.
Standardized tests force teachers to teach their students about topics like math and reading when the students are being neglected in the arts and social studies. And these tests are unfair to teachers who use non-standard testing techniques.
Okay, cross-examination.
When you said that it might not work for one or many persons, they'd be given under the same conditions, so that it might not work for them. But again, since the test goes through such tough screening, that I doubt if they don't work for that many people, then the question will be rewritten or they'll put in a different one in its place.
But even if it is changed, it may still be unfair because some other child could grow up in an environment that could involve gangs or drugs or things like that.
and they might get distracted from learning the material worthily, and he'll fail the test even if he's honest and hardworking. So the test is not fair.
All tests are in certain levels of unfairness. All testings are certain levels of unfairness, and there's never gonna there isn't gonna be a perfect test for like that, and those testings are gonna show what level the kids people are in. So if they're in 5th grade and they show that they're in 4th grade level, it wouldn't be better to repeat, so it can help them towards college. Because if they just keep passing grades by a little bit, when they get to college, they're going to completely fail.
Well, there will
Children in higher rate schools will have the potential to do better than students going to lower rate or inner city schools, and they shouldn't be denied the advancement just because they couldn't be brought up in a better place.
Well, the standardized tests are for that exact reason. They'll see what schools or what districts or what kids need help and how they're failing, and then they'll send resources to the school, maybe extra teachers or textbooks or something.
Okay, and now we'll have the negative side's conclusion.
The reason why our argument will be victorious is not only because of the excellent arguments we've presented and the inquisitive material that we have stated, but also because through this debate one can clearly come to recognize that this is truly the only truly reasonable argument for this debate, and much more honest research can be discovered. Therefore, I say again that kindergarten through 12th grade students should not be required to complete state-sanctioned minimum skills tests.
One more thing. The tests are unfair to the homeschooled people and students who don't have some of the things that the government put into their tests that are not covered in the homeschool, because the government has built these mainly because the government can basically, because the public schools are only teaching certain things, and the government can go from that type of things, and the homeschools teach different things, but not necessarily what's in the state-sanctioned test, and so they might not do that well on the test if they're homeschooled when they take it, because some things are not in the homeschool that are in the test.
Okay, and we'll end with the affirmative conclusion.
With standardized tests, we could identify the problems in our schools and bring the 24 out of 29 to the top 5, or ideally 1 out of 24.
And also about the homeschooling, it was if the person that was giving the homeschooling, if they thought that they need an education that was better than they either need to improve their homeschooling, or just if they thought that the home education was going to be better, then, and turns out that the state isn't as share the same values, then they should either put their kids back in homeschooling or just teach the same stuff. That's it.
Okay, we're done. Good. Okay. How many of you now agree that there should be some kind of state-sanctioned test for kindergarten through 12th grade? I should just make one distinction here. This is a good example of what I said. You know, you could think, you guys didn't you picked up on this a little bit, but then you didn't go with it. But I think there are a lot of people who might say, we can have state-sanctioned tests for high school, maybe middle school, but kindergarten, first grade? I mean, come on. At that point, let's let the teachers teach. And, you know, in that sense, the idea of teaching objective knowledge in kindergarten, you can't structure it that way for a test. Where you could do that in high school. Kids aren't emotionally ready for it, you know, and sort of, you know, doesn't really go with the kind of education you do at a childhood level. And then somebody could, you could actually just, all you had to do was argue against that. You know, you could have said, I think that we should have standardized testing for first grade through 12th grade, just not kindergarten. And that would have made your debate easier, actually, right? So this is one example of what I said, you know, make your debate easier by just arguing the specific point. Okay? And then you'll be able to do it. All right, well, let's take the vote then. Agreeing that, yes?
I'm kind of leaning on the same way with the kindergarten thing. Did I just go with, like...
All right, look, listen. Here's a resolution. There should be state-sanctioned tests for kindergarten through 12th grade. Now, if you think there should be state-sanctioned tests, but not through kindergarten to 12, maybe just first grade through 12, then you can't agree with that. You have to agree that it's kindergarten through 12. Every year they're tested. That has to be your position. Okay? So, all right, let's take the vote. How many think that there should be tests for every grade, kindergarten through 12? State-sanctioned tests. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay? Wow. And disagreements? State should not get involved with these, should not make the test mandatory.
Raise your hand up high.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now let's make sure we got this right though. And how many are undecided? 6. Well, no, that must be right. Oh yeah, that's right, it is right. Okay, 1, just 2. We got 10, 21, we've got 20, we've got 22.
That was 9. I
This
counted
was
9
9?
disagree.
All right. All right, it looks like we had some changes in the undecided, huh? But the disagreeing side, the negative side, no state tests went up 5. So you guys won the debate, negative side. All right. Austin Wyant was doing a debate that was quite different from these debates. This is the kind of debate I like. I like these debates, I'm not saying I don't like them, but I like more philosophical debates better. When it really gets right at the principles. These are indirectly related to first principles of morality and ethics and political philosophy and all that, theology. But this debate here that Austin and I are going to conduct and compete in is very much related to first principles of important things. So everybody pay attention to this debate. The resolution is that non-human animals, we say, non-human animals have rights that must be defended in civil society. Yes, you're going to say. Right?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay. So Mr. Wyant here is arguing that they should have rights, and I'm going to take a stab at debating Austin here. Haven't prepared it, but see how it goes. Okay. Neither of us are prepared, okay, so we're equal on this. I kind of want to use the blackboard as part of this, but I guess we can take the snaps from the committee. Okay. Let's just put this one down.
On the right.
Yeah. All right, animal rights, AR.
Rights to what?
All right, well, I'll explain it. The idea here is, you know how we think that humans have rights to life that the government must protect? We have the right not to be killed by another citizen. If we do, there's consequence, right? We have the right to not starve in our own country, so we have the opportunity to provide for ourselves, but if we don't, there's a sense in which if we can't, the government, or at least other people, in some sense, have the obligation to protect us and help us. Either the government or just private church, right? So that's what rights are. So the idea here is, do animals have such rights? Humans do, but do animals? And really the question depends upon the answer to another question, which is, where do rights come from? What are they? And, who is obliged to have them, and for what reason? And that gets into the question of, what is human nature? What's the difference between humans and animals? And ultimately, how God relates to all this. Does God want animals to have rights? Or does God want animals to serve us? So are we equal to other animals? These are all questions that are involved in this. And this is a very important topic because nowadays there are many people who really want to promote this idea of animal rights, and perhaps even at the expense of some humans. There are certain ethical philosophers. This guy Peter Singer in Princeton, he's like the top guy at Princeton University. Okay? And he thinks that, unborn babies are, in a sense, less valuable, less important, less to be protected than certain animals. And he's teaching at greatest universities in the world, and he really accepts the idea of infanticide. You can kill a baby up to like 1 year old, and it should be legal. And yet he'd want to protect certain animals from being killed. So this is a very important topic. It may seem crazy to you, but it's an important one for the sake of our country. Okay, so let's vote on this. So everyone understands what a right is. These would be things protected in law. So for instance, if an animal had a right to life, and you needed to eat it because you were starving, for instance, I would take it that you wouldn't be able to. You'd be prosecuted for killing this animal. That would be an extreme version. It may just be that they would have some kind of rights to not be cruelly treated. Like if someone, was mean to an animal, they could be put in jail. The reason they'd be put in jail is because the animal has a right not to be treated that way. Should they have those rights or not? So that's the question. All right, how many think that animals should have protected rights by the government? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And how many disagree? Think they should not have? Now look, remember, let's get the distinctions now. If you think they shouldn't have rights, it doesn't mean that you're mean to animals, that you think, okay, we should just go out and really torture animals. They have no rights. You could keep two things in your mind. You could say, St. Francis of Assisi and God would want us to have a certain kind of tenderness towards all things in creation, right? Because we're stewards of creation. We have the obligation to love the creation God made and to use it in a way that's dignifying to us and to the things, right? So you wouldn't be for any kind of cruelty to animals. You'd actually disdain that. You hate that kind of thing, torture of animals. But then you'd say to yourself, but just because I don't want cruelty to animals doesn't mean I think that they should have rights by the government. It's a whole different question, isn't it? Okay? Right? Okay, yes, no?
You're saying so much
All right, it's a complicated
that you're
issue.
making it hard because you're delving so much into the issue that you're expanding the topic so much that it's hard. Like one statement, yes, definitely, and then the next statement makes you go the other way.
Let me sum it up, okay? Because really, I want to make the distinction because there are a lot of people who just say, if I'm not for rights for animals, then I'm not for treating animals nicely. And that's not true, okay? So that's all I'm trying to say. Okay, so all it is whether or not you think they should have rights protected by the government, not whether you like animals or hate them or anything like that. Okay.
You have to vote again.
Yeah, I think we should. Having said that, you're right. All right, so having said that, how many right now think that they should have rights protected by the government? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Didn't change anything. Okay, and how many of you disagree with that? Think that they should not have rights? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Animal killers.
All right, and how many of us are undecided on this question? Don't really know the answer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, 25. That's what we had last time. Okay. So we'll begin.
Good morning, parents, teachers, and fellow students of the Montfort Academy again. I, Austin White, come to support the resolution that non-human animals have rights that should be protected in civil society. I have several points I would like to present in support of my side, the first being as follows. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states that animals are entrusted to man's stewardship, he must show them kindness. They may, however, be used to serve the just satisfaction of man's needs. Is that not rightly so? Is that not truly reasonable? Though you can use animals for proper and just reasons, that still doesn't mean animals have no rights. So, being that human beings are much more developed than animals, we should therefore have more rights, but that doesn't mean that animals have no rights at all, because they are living beings just like us. Copying everything down. Yeah, I guess that's it.
What are rights, in your view, Mr. Wyatt?
Something that you are deserving of, or worthy of, such as life, property, happiness, a safe and healthy life.
For what reason would an animal deserve this protection, this right? You said they have to be worthy of the right. What makes an animal worthy of a right?
Because it possesses life, it has a certain amount of order, dignity. Animals react to many things that humans do, such as pain, pleasure, happiness, loss, and such like.
So animals have rights because they have emotions?
Yes, that's sensible, that's reasonable.
So the basis for a right is the possession of emotions.
Part of it, yes.
So plants don't have emotions and rocks, but animals do.
But they live. Rocks do not live. Plants do. Plants
So,
live.
but it's not just life, it's life plus emotions. Would you say would the plants have rights?
It could be, but you're getting off the subject. It's non-human animals that have rights. Is a plant a non-human animal?
No, but I can ask you if you think they do have rights, plants.
Well, I have to get more into that off the topic. Well, it also has a dignity and order and beauty. So it's again reasonable that it should have rights to a natural life of its own.
Okay. To understand how to resolve this question, I think we have to discover what we mean by rights and why it is that animals would deserve them. And of course, animals would not give themselves rights. We would have to give them rights. We'd have to speak in their place because they can't speak and communicate this desire. So then we have to discuss why it is that we're obliged to give them these rights. Well, I think we can make this clear by stating what a right is and seeing if an animal deserves it. rights have always been bound up with responsibility. So one has a right to live because God wants us to live in order to be able to love Him and do good on earth. And we know this is true because the right to life is not absolute. In the Catholic teaching, it's not simply the ability to live that allows one to be protected by the government, but the ability to live in such a way that one contributes to, in some way, the common good. So, for instance, someone who commits a certain crime that destroys the common good and is a threat to other people's existence and dignity, their life is forfeit, according to St. Thomas Aquinas and the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And if prudence dictates, the state could execute that person. So in a sense, the right to life is an absolute. The right to property, obviously, is an absolute. In a time of war, for instance, there might be higher taxes. If one makes money in a certain way that's illegal, it could be taken away. So it must be that rights have something to do with obligations of a moral nature. Well, that would mean that any being with a right has to have moral capacity, the capacity to be moral, to make choices. But choices require free will. And they also require an intellect. My opponent has admitted that he believes rights are obligatory for only those beings that have at least life and at the most emotions. But emotions do not permit someone to freely choose. Emotions are, in a sense, determined by the outside world. Animals don't have control over their emotions. They have no free will. If you put food in front of a hungry animal, it will always go for the food. If it's hungry and healthy and is able to move, it will go and eat that. If you put food in front of a human being, the human being could use his intellect and refrain from the food if there's a higher purpose, such as fasting, or maybe someone else needs it more than he does. So I think the basic argument is that animals do not have rights because they don't have the capacity to deserve rights. They don't deserve rights, as you said, because they do not have dignity in the same way we do. The dignity of being made in the image and likeness of God, meaning having an intellect and a free will and responsibility of a moral nature to love God and love our neighbor. I could just do a quick syllogism. That's a logical formulation on the board. You can see this argument here.
So if we begin the argument with the first premise, say rights are connected to responsibility. Okay? Now I'm going to do a second premise. Responsibility requires a moral capacity. Okay? And let's just, moral capacity requires free will. In other words, freedom. In order to choose to do right or wrong, you have to be free to do such. But what does freedom require? I don't mean the freedom to run around in the open in a field, like an animal can do, and the freedom to obey his passions and his desires. I mean the freedom to choose right or wrong. That requires a mind. Okay, here's the clincher. Animals do not have minds. And what's the conclusion? Animals do not have rights. Okay.
Well, if they don't have minds, they are still able to think to a certain degree.
I agree. If you mean judge the outside world, hey, there's a rabbit, I'm gonna go get it. And then it goes and judges the rabbit to be not a rock or something, and then kind of thinks in a way and goes towards it, yes. But I would call that emotional thinking. It's purely emotional calculation. So what it is, it's not, they don't say to themselves, they can never say to themselves, actually they can never say anything, they can't use concepts or words. They can never say, it is right for me to go after that rabbit because I must eat in order to live so I can take care of my children because that's moral. Therefore the government owes me a right to be able to do this. There's no such dialogue going on in the animal's brain.
Okay, but why, then you think, why did God create animals? For beauty, for our use, but for prudent use too. So, we should only use them for our just satisfaction when the right time comes. So, that doesn't mean we can just kill them all the time, whenever we feel like it. So, therefore, they do have a certain amount of rights not to be killed unless it's prudent.
That's a good point. I would say that denying animals rights does not require the idea that animals can be exploited and used in every way possible depending on whatever we'd like to do with them. I think there's a middle ground position. I'm not sure how that would, play out in the government exactly, but I mean it would be similar to you could chop down, trees in somebody's yard, and you could get arrested for that. But the reason would be is because the person who owned those trees, it's his property. It wouldn't be because the trees have rights not to be chopped down. You see, it would be analogous to that. And cruelty to animals hurts the person who does the cruelty because it's a sign that he has something wrong with his heart. So that you're right there.
So plants could have rights because they are linked to the rights of a human being, because they are owned by him as his property, because you can't chop down a tree, so there it has indirect rights.
Indirect rights, that's a good point, I like that. I would just say that, insofar as the tree is property of the person who has rights, then in a sense, we have property rights. So the tree is bound up in the property right. But that right is ultimately inherent in the person, not in the animal. The animal doesn't have direct rights. So I would say I could accept them having indirect rights, but of course that's not what the resolution says. So you have to argue for the position that they have just generic rights, which I would think would be direct rights like human rights. So nice try there, but not going to work.
Okay.
Oh, and so you'll have we'll end with Mr. Lyons' affirmative construction. Affirmative conclusion, I'm sorry.
Human beings are not much more evolved than human beings. It's been proven that dogs have similar cells that we do. So we're connected. Again, I'll use the word indirectly. So even if if animals are related to us who have rights, the full amount of rights, but in a lesser way, that means they have a less amount of rights than we do, but that doesn't mean that they have no rights at all. And one more question, do we give animals rights? Where do our rights come from? They come from God. And we didn't create the animals, so we can't give them rights. God gives them rights, and I think man should recognize that.
Good. Okay, that's debate. How many now agree that animals should have, non-human animals should have rights? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right. And how many of us disagree? Animals should not have rights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And how many of us don't know at this point? 1, 2. All right, is that right? Yep. 25. All right, so the affirmative side went up 8. The negative side went down 2.
He smoked you.
And undecided went down. So very good, Austin.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Never use logic in a debate. All right, you want to wrap up? Yeah, you wrap up and I'll you know that the argument about animals having rights is a really tricky one, and you know, it really does depend on where rights come from and why they're needed and what use they serve. I mean, I really do think they do not have rights. I mean, I was arguing a position I really think, and it's an important thing to understand that rights do. You know, there's two versions of rights. Like the liberal kind of Enlightenment idea that a right is something that is demanded by an individual simply because he feels like he's owed something. You know, and it is based on emotions. You know, so the whole idea of the rights to certain kinds of marriages, it's based on emotions. Then you have the Catholic natural law view that says that the only reason human beings have rights is because we have higher obligations than the state, right? We have higher calling. We're not just individuals in some machine like communism called the state, or in some consumer market where we're just consuming animals, you know, to gain pleasure. We have these higher callings that the state must give us the room in society to do. So the right to religious freedom, the right to speech, the right to kind of order your family's education the way you want. Okay, all these things are not given to you by the government, as Mr. Lyons said, very astutely, but they're given to us by God. The government recognizes what's already been given to us by God, and given to us so that we can do what He wants, not just so we can do what we want. So in a sense, the first version is, I have a right to do what I want. And the second one is, I have a right to do what God wants. And the first version is, I have a right to do what I want, the state, you better let me do it. And then the other version is, I have a right to do what God wants, so the state better let me have the freedom to do that. So based on those two views of rights, then what do you do with animal rights, see? If that's true what I said, and I think that distinction's true at least, but if the first version's true, I think animals have emotions, they have desires, so you give them rights. But the second version, do they have obligations to God, animals? Now, here's the tricky part that Austin brought up. We have obligations to God that include how we treat the creatures around us. So now we have to figure that question out. Does that mean animals have rights, or does that mean that we have moral obligations? See, it's a different thing. So it's a complicated issue. Yeah.
Wouldn't only God be able to answer that question as to what obligation the animals have to him?
Yeah, and so far as I know, there's nothing in scripture, tradition, the natural law, that says that animals have any moral obligations. And I would say philosophically, they can't have moral obligations. They don't have intellects. And only intellectual beings can have morality. So that's how I sum it up. But I lost.
But he keeps talking about it.
Yes.
But all of the intellect that we're discussing is intellect that we measure in our own terms of what we understand. What if it's beyond what we understand? And therefore we can't understand how animals are living up to their obligations to God.
Well, yeah, that's always I've heard that argument before. I would just say that we have the ability to recognize things lower than reason and things above our reason. So we know when things are mysteries and when they're super rational, and we shouldn't try to understand the Trinity, for instance, how Christ is both God and man. But then there are things below reason which we can recognize to not have rationality. Like, for instance, a computer, no matter how smart it is, no matter how quick it can process information, there's something in us that knows almost infallibly that it's not quite conscious of itself. And it's not quite really thinking and judging the way we do. And it never will. And we have these nightmare movies. Yeah, right, 2001. I was going to say, we have these nightmare movies where we kind of think they will. Ooh. And I always watch them and go, I'm not scared of it. This can't happen.
But see, we created those, but we did not create the animals.
Good point.
So the animals have come from someplace beyond us, whereas the computer has come from us.
All we know from Scripture, though, is that the animals were put under the subjugation of man. And so, in doing so, we know that only man was created in the image and likeness of God. And so we know there's a difference.
But there was a purpose for the animals that we still are not positive of, other than eating.
That's true. I mean, I think that, I always talk about this in my philosophy class with boys. I mean, what's the purpose of a lion, I say, is it just to, to look at, or to, is it just so we can eat, weaker animals and just to live? I say no. Animals have this mystical importance. For instance, how would we know about God's majesty and royalty without the lion? Doesn't the lion reflect something about God that no other animal can? And then the kids say, well, why is there a duck-billed platypus? and I say, it's God's humor. It's His humor. It really is. And then you have, the eagle, the lofty flying animal. And all these animals, really, the purpose of them, to me, is to connect us more with what God's like. And then He also allows us to use them for our good, But cruelty to the animal is a bad thing. It's a sign of immorality in the person. But that doesn't mean that animals should have the right not to be hurt by us. Because once you do that, you're messing around with what rights are. And you're, in a sense, I think, degrading what a right really is. So there's got to be another way to prevent that. So anyway, we'll continue this discussion some other time.
How about Alexander?
Yeah, go ahead.
You said that you believe that animals help us understand what God is like.
Yeah.
Well, then, since we owe our respect to God, do we owe our respect to the animals if they symbolize God?
Yes, I agree. But respecting an animal could mean allowing it to be used for what it's supposed to be used for, to help us. So, for instance, we consume animals, and we love them for that. And in a sense, we're respecting their purpose by doing that. Okay? And you know what we learn from consuming an animal and bringing it into our being and growing from it? Our Lord, allowed us to consume Him. And we respect Him by doing what He told us, to consume His body and blood. So in a sense, the consumption of other animals is kind of like a foreshadowing of our Lord allowing us to consume Himself. You see?
Here's an example. Here's another example. Excuse me. The American Indian, Native Americans, right? They showed great respect